I'm laughing and smiling as I'm starting this introduction because before we turn the mic on, I'm kind of falling in love with my next guest. We're having conversations about leadership. We're having conversations about life. We're having conversations about spirit, all kinds of stuff. And I just know I met a kindred spirit. I met Will. Will, I never asked you before I turned on the mic how to say your name. It's Will Keiper, right?
Keiper.
Keiper. It's Will Keiper.
The
That's
anglicized, Americanized version of what was once Keiper.
Okay,
Of
so
course.
this is podcast 101. Know how to say your guest's name before you start after
I
500
love it. That's a
episodes.
good place to start.
Yeah,
We've already established we're both fallible human beings. I love it.
exactly. So after 500 episodes, I will finally learn this lesson. But I was talking to my friend, my mentor, one of my first coaches ever, Steve Chandler, known as the Godfather of coaching, and you may have known him from the book launch from The Rising Leader. About him being on the podcast, and I was talking about his new book, The Leader and the Coach, The Art of Humanity and Leadership. And I noticed that he co-wrote it with Will Keiper, and I've never met him. I didn't know anything about him, even though he's been around in my circles. So I started reading the book, and the wisdom and just the intelligence that Will brings really got me thinking. And then Steve talked about what Will is working on next. And just more and more, I just wanted to talk to this man. Never talked to him before the mic was on. So this is going to be all new. Officially, Will Keiper is a former 8-time public company leader. He's been a CEO. He's been a COO. He's been the president. He's been on boards. Now he's a business advisor and leadership coach. And he's written 10 nonfiction books, which if you're going to be around Steve Chandler, you're going to be prolific. I'm on my 5th book, so we're all turning into this. And he's now working on a book that's called Noticing You Are Not Your Thoughts, Emotions, and Stories. And we've talked about that before on the podcast. Something I don't usually let people come on and talk too much about because we go off into life coachy land, and I don't want to do that. But Will's going to be the exception. Will, thanks for being on the podcast.
It's my pleasure, Mark. Thanks for having me. And I'm delighted so far with our conversation, and I'm sure it will only get better.
So I'm going to start with something that I kind of bookmarked in the leader and the coach. And it says, and it's the section that says, my awakening. The opportunity in this leadership experience was to wake up to the necessity and the value of empathy in leadership, specifically mine. It opened my eyes to the power and necessity of an organizational community and team, not the boss and the troops. So that tells me that there was a Will Keiper who was the old school kind of leadership, and then one who went through a transformation. Can you talk about who you were and what happened and why your focus changed in the way you lead?
Sure, of course. I definitely went to the old school. And early in my career, I was mentored by some of those people that you see in the pictures from the day, old guys, flinty, scowling, unapproachable, all male, right? Not authentic, not genuine, motivated by, I'll say, greed or as close as they could get. And so I learned how to do that. It's not a manager. You're not a manager, you're a boss, and you have to remember that. And you have to remember that you're the boss and nobody else is. Those other people are there to serve you.
Mm.
So I had this mentality, and I had some people who were really, really successful, very financially oriented, very management structurally oriented, but there wasn't there just wasn't a shred of something that we might call empathy or compassion, and there wasn't a lot of listening. There was a lot of telling. So I was forged in what not to do in
But even
terms of
at that time when you and I were coming up, uh, we didn't even know the words authenticity and empathy and all that when it came to leadership. Right. So it's not like we understand this and it's not here. We were steeped in the water of, we didn't even know that existed.
No, it's true. It wasn't like I was ignoring something that was present and or that other people were practicing incredibly well. You know, I mean, uh, you had people that were masters of, I'll say, agglomeration, you know, Harold Janines of the world and others who were just celebrated for being tough. And by the way, also very financially successful, and the shareholders were happy. So I've done a lot of work in public companies over the years, and so I understand that. And in private companies, the master to be served is the continuity of the business. The continuity of the business requires performance at some level that is satisfactory, if not to you as the entrepreneur, to the people who are the stakeholders. So anyway, it was a way of learning about really the mechanics of business. I'll say more about the management than the leadership, if I can make that distinction.
Sure.
There were a lot of people who were managers, and you learned about management. Leadership wasn't really even in the vocabulary at the time as a, I'll say, skill or even aspiration. So let me pause there. Otherwise, I could fill the rest of the time.
What was the catalyst for the change? Where did you all of a sudden have this epiphany that something different was available to you?
I'll tell you a small story. I was running a software company, and at the time it was one of the top 10 in the world. But it was really tiny at the time. And we, though, had created something that Microsoft decided what might be a nice feature in Windows. So our entire company, which was more than $100 million company at the time, all of a sudden was contacted, not me personally, but our top two engineers. Off they trot to Redmond, Washington, which is the headquarters of Microsoft. And lo and behold, in about 18 months to 2 years, our product that we were, selling $100 million plus a year showed up in the stack of Windows, like so many other things got integrated. But anyway, fortunately, once the people were hired, we knew something had to change. That we looked at how much money we had. Could we hire a lawyer? No. So we went on with, okay, we've got to find a way to get out of the way. In the process of that, I had, as the CEO at the time, I had to try to figure out how to keep as many people employed as possible and cut costs, though, every quarter in order to try to stay even. We were public too. We try to stay at or near break even, but I didn't know where that catch was going to be. I was going to be able to make that catch, or we were as a company. That's the old school thinking. Me, okay, there's a tell. But so every quarter I would have to stand up in front of the employees and say, I'm sorry to say that we're going to have to let X number of people go. And I wish it could be otherwise. I wish I could tell you ahead of time, but I just can't do it. And I didn't talk to anybody. I didn't talk to the employees about it. I didn't have, roundtable conversations because I didn't want to know the stories. And this was how it was done, at the time. But I had a great board member, Gary Liebel, who had a conversation with me at some point, and he said, I think maybe you're not getting this quite right. Isn't the goal here to keep as many people employed for as long as we can and to keep jobs for as many people as we can? And I said, well, yeah. He says, well, why don't you just tell them that?
Mm.
And I went, wow. Oh, you mean let them in on what the actual thing that's going on here is, instead of protecting myself from hard conversations or maybe even some inputs that would have been helpful to me. So that was an aha moment for me. And my board member, I'm sure he's going, I wish we hadn't hired this guy, but he just said, why don't you just tell them the truth? And the truth is the same for everybody in this situation. We want to preserve jobs. We're a software company. The assets walk in and out of the building every day, So anyway, that was the beginning of a shift for me when I went, oh, you mean just be open and authentic, be accessible? Those are hallmarks of, I would say, where I got to eventually.
I just had this conversation with a client to this morning where he was just put in charge of an entire organization that is a very different discipline than he understands. And he said to me, he says, it's just so awkward and like he feels like an imposter in front of them and all that. And I said, okay, so have you called the elephant out in the room? And he said, what do you mean? I said, have you told them, hey, by the way, I'm coming in. You have this expertise. I don't. And I'm leading this organization. So it probably feels a little weird. He goes, oh, and he wrote it down. It's like, just call the elephant out in the room. Be
Right,
honest,
right,
as your board member said.
right. Precisely, precisely.
So had the growth. So that was the spark. Now tell us about the growth trajectory.
The growth trajectory for me was a little bit slow, but I did my co-author, Steve Chandler, for The Leader and the Coach. He's also my coach, and he's the first coach I had. And that's been now almost 14 years ago that I met Steve. And over the course of the first 5 or 6 years, I wasn't a good listener. I was telling him what I knew. I never. He's a guy sitting there going, yeah, 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 and he's cashing his checks, every month or every few weeks, and saying, thank you very much. I don't have to do much here because I want to, but he's not ready. So anyway, over the course of time, he introduced me to um, things that you would say are in the humanity range, not so much spirituality or even psychology as much as things like Byron Katie, loving what is. And for those that don't know, Byron Katie has developed something called the work with a capital W. It's a form of inquiry into the truth of what we think or we're thinking or seeing or we think we're. And so that was a really provocative book for me to think, oh, you mean what I'm thinking may not actually be the truth.
Yeah, that book's a
And
depth charge in someone's life who hasn't
it,
thought
it,
that way before.
it really was. So anyway, Steve introduced me. He was a very subtle, because I'm not a guy who will be forced, because remember, I was old school and I was slow to warm. So I couldn't be forced, but he would send me things, or he'd send me a link to a video about something that was like just, and he would, most times he wouldn't even say, for your information. He would just send it knowing that I'd either feed on it or not take it. And slowly I began to see the world differently, that, oh, maybe the best of me isn't what I'm trying to portray to the world outside of me. Maybe the best of me is actually something that's already here, not even trying to get out, but if it got out, maybe that would be an enhancement, not a negative. So slowly I went through this sort of opening process, stimulated by reading, by videos, ultimately by conversations with Steve. We ended up writing 2 books together, deepened the relationship. And as a function of that, I became very interested in a view of the world that is, we're sort of one energy, kind of the quantum theory of the universe. And I got very interested in, oh, could that really be true? Could I be energy, and could you be energy, and could this glass of water be energy? And I just got fascinated by thinking about things in a different way. And that began to open me up, and to allow, I mean, I wore an old school thing for guys in my early days anyway, was you wear a suit and you wear a tie, but it's
Totally
armor.
armor. It's
It's
totally
armor,
armor.
and the tie is to choke you, so that you remember that you shouldn't breathe deeply and allow things to come in. Keep it tight, keep it really tight. So that was a loosening that was going on throughout this time, as I got exposed to ideas that were different, and I began employing those, especially in my consulting with entrepreneurs and business nonprofits, even, where I didn't feel as tethered to that mentality. That mentality has now completely shifted for me, because of what's happened just since the turn of the century to change the game forever.
What's happened since the turn of the century for you?
I'm glad you asked me that question because here's what happened, not just for me, but for the first day of the 21st century, the top 10 companies in the world were not technology companies. Okay. Microsoft, uh, Google, Alphabet, Meta, all of these, all these companies that now dominate uh, the top 10 most valuable companies in the world are now technology companies. I think the top 10 has 8 out of 10 of those companies are technology companies. Berkshire Hathaway is in and out of there, but they're in there. They're not a technology company, but what do they invest in? Technology companies, principally. So anyway, one of the big shifts that happened was that there was the rise of intelligent machines, right? Computing power. And secondly, there was a rise of automated systems. So this began completely changing the requirements, what was expected of the workforce and also of leaders, by the way, because those companies began showing that you could build the company in a very different way based on knowledge workers, not on widgets or finance or hotels or things like that. So, but those two drivers, the idea of intelligent machines and automated systems were huge and made and changed the face of who dominates companies around the world and how does the world grow. The second factor was COVID, because these two things have happened just now. It's, believe it or not, we're coming up next year on a quarter of this century being gone already, but it's gone like it's just had an accelerant associated with it. So with COVID, all those things that had happened were further exacerbated, meaning that the workplace got completely shifted. The workplace of old hadn't changed that much, meaning even in these technology companies, you would go to the office, right? They had big headquarters in Silicon Valley and elsewhere, Austin and Boston and places like that, and Israel, places around the world, right? But the COVID turned the idea of a workplace and home upside down. It became one life. If you think of one energy, it became, oh, it's my one life and my one life is centered at home. So, and that drove further technology changes in things like we're doing now. We're on a Zoom conference, right? We had to learn about remote work. And it just became a wake-up call that, wait a minute, we've got automated systems, we've got intelligent computing now, we've got all these things going on. And now I'm not so sure that I even need to be going to my workplace. And I'm not sure how much value I'm actually getting from my quote unquote manager or leader. Questions started coming up. In 2021, 43 million people in the United States alone got moved to do what? They resigned. The world, so we went through just an amazing transformation that of course speeds up now, continuing every single day.
Right.
So that's what's happened that has forced guys like me and others, even the juniors of me, who think that that's a good style, perhaps, to be remote, inauthentic, not genuine, inaccessible, etc. works. It doesn't work in this fast environment, and it doesn't work where people get their own value, because they're not going to stick with you if you can't help them. It's the old bargain was, I'll pay you if you show up, and if you do a good enough job, I might renew you for tomorrow. Those days are gone. Now it's a bargain. It's not a one-way street.
Do you think part of that is because the job market is just on fire, and people are just leaving jobs for bigger salaries and more remoteness because you can work from anywhere? I work with government contractors who can't find people who are willing to get security clearances and go work on site in government because they can get that kind of money and go live in Miami.
Yeah, the whole hybrid work thing is still not, I'll say, solved in a way that is clear to anybody, I don't think, but it's here to stay for sure. And I can say this, that the fact that we have automated systems and intelligent machines has forced the bottom part of the workforce to either stay where they are or learn how to deal with automated systems and intelligent machines, meaning you have to understand computing as table stakes for most work today. So I think that the net effect of all this is that knowledge and the expansion of knowledge is going exponentially, right? And workers are needed who don't do what intelligent machines and automated systems do. We want them to do things that humans do. Human added value, intelligence, thought process, the human factor. Okay, so that brings me back to why was the subtitle to The Leader and the Coach, The Art of Humanity and Leadership. That's why, because humanity as a factor, if you don't take it to these knowledge workers, the best ones, know they can go anywhere. And you just gave an example of it in your with your client, right? They can go anywhere. So if you want to attract them, you've got to be a great leader, you've got to be humane, you've got to exhibit qualities of, I'll say, the care and concern qualities, compassion, empathy, listening, and hearing, not just listening, but hearing. All of those things have to be now baked into this leader who's going to be successful running not just the big companies that we were talking about, but companies everywhere, because the knowledge is everywhere. These articles about, oh, the workforce has more power today. It's not like this is lost on anybody. So it's now you have to be in the game of humanity. There has to be care and concern, and it has to be a leader transforming so that they can transform the culture in that direction. If the leader doesn't do it first, it ain't going to happen in the culture. The leader still has to model it. One of the most important factors for people staying where they are is access to the leader. Access not in, I want to sit down and have a beer with you, but access either from the words, from the visibility, from things that the leader says being modeled by their immediate boss and things like that. All of these things, it's gotten to be more complicated, but I think a lot more interesting for people who really want to be successful as leaders to really try on from the inside out, not from the outside in.
That's a great segue, because the thing that I really couldn't wait to talk to you about is the fact that with all this change, with the acceleration of change, with the political discourse, with the technological advances, with the AI is going to take your job, with all of the with the lack of human contact a lot of people have, your focus on presence and your focus on that inside out perspective on life, I think is really useful for people as they're trying to navigate this new world. I'd love for you to talk about your new book and your focus.
Sure. Yeah, I thank you. The book is very simply titled Noticing, and it's because of I went through that. I had a noisy mind. Literally my entire life until about 2 years ago, when all of this transformation really came together for me. I learned
it was a good decade of Steve Chandler knocking on your brain.
It was, and then all of a sudden I went, wow, there's something here. What is this? This is gold. But I was a person who lived being hijacked by thoughts and emotions and stories, and having a thought and then bolting on and emotionally feeling to it, and then creating a story about it, and then modifying the story for the circumstances. Oh, I have to remember that version for that group of people, this version for others. And I was just a mess in my head. My mind was out of control. And so in noticing, I talk about that, and I finally figured out that I'm actually going to, because I didn't really like make notes of the process as I was going through it, but I figured out that for the reader, I'm going to have a chapter that says how to still your mind, and at least have, it may not be the GPS version, and it can't be, here's what you do. You do this, and then you think that thought, but it can't, it's going to be a version that says, go to the big red warehouse, turn right, go about 2 miles, see the house with the white picket fence, turn left, try that. Anyway, what I figured out was that I was constantly permitting myself to be hijacked by my thoughts. And thoughts, I have since learned, are not something I'm conjuring up. They are mostly, almost always random, especially in the part of your brain that's called the default mode network. If you're in the executive mode, you're on, you're doing, you're empowered, you're doing, you're acting, you're planning, you're thinking, right? In this other thing, you are not the master of it. And so anyway, noticing for me was about the process of learning to, first of all, get still, at least to some degree, and then how to be actively present, meaning alert, still, but right here in the moment. And learning that has been the most powerful thing I could have ever done in my life. And the reason that I say that is that what I figured out was that, and the question, why is that? And I figured out that the noticing is the answer to this question, which is one of my favorite questions. What more is needed in this moment? I can never, when I ask that question to myself, I can never come up with any. I mean, my mind doesn't even want to go starting. And I finally figured out why that was. It's because I figured this out. The moment as it is perfect. It can't be otherwise. And once you learn to accept that that moment, which by the way, because of the way our sensory impressions work, is already past, we're translating what happened, just happened, into our feelings about it or thoughts about it right now. So anyway, noticing is how to see those moments in just that way, that they're perfect. So I learned to still my mind, and there were a lot of things that happened along the way that in a very short period of time that I call a journey of grace for me, that took me from a noisy mind internally, sort of always knotted up and focused on me and my problems and my emotions and my stories. By the way, most of us can't escape at least some of that. But noticing is my path to being a calmer, more contented person with what is, and not looking for what's wrong with the moment, which we do much of our lives. Oh, if only I had different, better, more expensive, bigger, and you realize that, or I ultimately realized that chase is okay. But if that's your principal chase, you're never living in the moment that is with you, that you're in right at the moment. Just like you and I, I mean, this is a very, very intimate conversation about these things, because we're talking about something that isn't about, I'm not telling you a story. I'm not telling you what I thought that just ran through. I'm not giving you an emotional reaction to something. Those are interesting, but they really take your focus off of being truly present in the moment, accepting of it, appreciating it, and not sweating the thought that might be going through, or the emotion that you had about Aunt Gertie 20 years ago, and the woman that just walked by reminded me of her, and therefore I'm not probably going to have a good day because, these things that we do with our, So anyway, I'm a person now, I would say, at peace and at rest. But I'm also fallible, and there's going to be a chapter in the book called Relapse. It's not going back to an addiction center or, anything like that, but it's about how no matter how intentional we are and how well we practice and how well we focus, we can get hijacked because I had those behaviors. I opened myself to that way of life for 70 years, so anyway, but I am a hope for people who are younger than that,
Right.
because I was able to do it.
I talk to people about the same thing. There's no reason for me to be alive. I'm an addict, I was a drug addict, alcoholic. I was, addicted to everything. In the fact that I was able to put a life together and a life where I could actually contribute and create things and raise a family is a miracle. And
Yeah.
if I can do it, anybody can do it. But it
Yeah.
took
Yeah.
a lot of work. So so the last question on this topic is, so I'm a 40-year-old VP of something or other, and I'm running so hard trying to take care of my family, trying to meet deadlines, do all this stuff. That's real nice for you, Mr. 70-year-old, to be able to sit there and be peaceful. How does that apply to me is always the case. Like that's something lovely for other people, but my life is too busy. How does that make me a better leader or more productive?
I mean, I think the question to be asked is, how are you too busy to be contented with what you have? Are you too busy to be happy? Are you too busy to be having a conversation with your child where you're 100% focused on the child or your significant other? Are you willing? Can you be present? Are you too busy to be present any moment other than when you're at work? And when you're home, are you thinking only about work? Well, I would say that it's a gift if I could open your mind to considering you could have the life that you have the things that you have the challenge of work that you have, and also be able to focus on the rest of life. More importantly, bringing those moments of attention to the interactions in your work, where I assure you, will be a more powerful, influential, probably productive leader than you are today, by taking a pause and letting people feel it. I think the whole thing about humanity and leadership and in the morphing of workforces, it's about one thing. It's about allowing feeling to come in, because we have it. We've tried to keep it checked at the door. We've tried to keep feelings checked at the door. We've tried to keep the rest of life checked at the door. It's not possible. If humans are and especially as knowledge workers means humans are more valuable than ever. They're the change agents that are going to create value in the company and create the sustainability of the corporation. If you don't modify the approach to the care and feeding of humans, you're going to get the same reward that you're getting at home by being overly too busy to notice.
True.
I think that's the question. Are you too busy to notice what's going on in front of you?
Yeah. You said right along these lines, you said so many beautiful, like there's so many life-changing things in this podcast. If someone just listened like several times to you and picked something to implement, the thing you said for me that I think is the epiphany is you said, I allowed myself to be hijacked by these lower thoughts, by these automatic, non-directed thoughts,
Yeah.
rather than the executive function by the higher self. Like when you said that, I remember not knowing I had a choice. If I was hijacked, I was hijacked and I was screwed. And that still happens with food. Like it's still like I still find myself stuffing my face with something before I even thought, or pressing buy on something on Amazon before I even thought. Right. So
Right.
that hijack happens all the time. But more and more, if you practice, from what I hear, is you
Yeah.
get some semblance of mastery over where you're going to place your attention and who's in charge of the ship. Is that what I heard you say?
It's true. That's it, precisely it. Um, and it is a practice. It is noticing is for a reason. I mean, we say, "Oh, I noticed," and people know what that means. It means I didn't just see it. I didn't just observe. Noticing means there's a little incremental something there, and what I call that is, I think that the incremental something is curiosity. It's you're observing, but you provide, you're offering an energetic connection along with the mere observation. That's noticing. It has an energetic connection with the observed, and so that if it's a conversation with someone, we've all been in trance-like states when we're sitting across from someone, not really seeing. In fact, if you took them away, maybe you wouldn't even notice.
Right.
But it's about adding a little bit of energetic connection to that, saying, I see, conveying the fact that you see, you're listening, you're engaged, you're present. Because why be anywhere else? I mean, this life happens where you sit, where you stand, where you are in the moment. That's where it happens. Yeah, you can make plans, but it all happens in the moment, and then the next moment, and then the next moment. So anyway,
That's amazing. When's the book going to be done?
I'm saying early summer will be out.
Is so on your blog, on your website, there's a lot of articles and blog posts about noticing. Is some of what you're writing in the book already there on your website?
Yes, it's really the introduction of tidbits about noticing, and it is Will Keiper, KEIPER.com. Thank you for that. And yeah, I'm just putting out some little teasers, and I'm going to start doing some little video, like 1 minute of noticing, just little things that, like these. I mean, it's so hard not to just, it's so easy not to get the full content of one comment about noticing, because there's a lot to unpack. And part of the process for me is trying to keep this extremely lean and accessible, because that's what noticing is. And I wanted the book itself and my writing to reflect that lean, muscular nature of things, not overpacked with content, like and just try to have it be reflective of that.
Nice.
We,
We're gonna put the link to your website, and I'm gonna put the link to your blog posts on the on our show notes, so that people can go and get some of that reading, because everything you shared for me, again, the reason I'm a leadership coach, the reason I do what I do, is because I'm really tired of people paying what the price they think they have to pay to be in the 1%. Just the
yeah,
just the just it used to be, I used to say the destroyed marriages, all this. Now it's the
yeah,
freaking mental health.
yeah.
And what you're offering is a way to be healthy in the midst of so much change and chaos. So I appreciate you bringing this to the world.
Thank you very much. To me, it really is the concept that it's about health, but it's about the bigger concept of well-being. And it's true for organizations. And it's not just the people working in the 1% or at the 1%. Leaders are everywhere, as you know. I mean, that's why you're in leadership. We can let people know a little bit about the secret of being in the leadership business. Everybody's a leader. A mom or dad in their little family unit at home is a leader. A person on a nonprofit board is a leader. The leaders are everywhere, and the lessons of leadership apply everywhere. So when we say leadership, it's kind of we're saying really it's everything, but you don't want it. But it's from the perspective is, how do you help move other people to a higher place? That's what leadership really is. And that can happen with one-on-one, in a family, in a Cub Scout group, if they still have Cub Scout groups,
They do.
things like that. So anyway, I think it's leadership is a beautiful a way to approach these issues and think about it as, okay, I'm a leader wherever I am. You're a leader by walking around. So
It's amazing. I was actually at an experiential thing in doing a meditation on leadership, and when in my meditation, why was I chosen? It says because you stood up.
Mhm.
Leader basically is just raising your hand and going, okay, I will. I'm in.
Right.
Right now,
It's so true.
now
It's
live
so
up to
true.
it. Right. It's not that complicated. It's not that, it's not easy, but it's simple. Will, thank you again for bringing just so much wisdom and so much experience to the conversation. I appreciate you.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate being here with you, Mark.
Everybody else,
So long.
I hope you savored this conversation. Sometimes we're by a warm fire of wisdom and we don't even know the gold that we got. So thank you for hanging with us. I love you a ton. Have a great rest of the day.